Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. We're going to do a little tour around the garden here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Things are really starting to jump. We were out of town for like 3 days, went down to Athens, Georgia, did a couple videos down there. If you haven't, one from Ram Gibberson's garden, limbing up shrubs into trees, which is something we do quite a bit in this garden, has already gone up from that trip down to Athens. But just in the 3 days we were gone, boy, you can really see how things can jump quickly. And when you're looking at it every day, sometimes you're not really picking up on it, but if you'll skip 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, things can really get going. The lantana, I think we're having an open garden on June 22nd, the details of which are in the Sunday garden question and answers if you're interested. I think the lantana will be in absolute full bloom by then. We're probably at 20% right now. These are perennial ones that come back. But this Summer Jewels red salvia is just unbelievable, because when I think about Summer Jewels salvia, and I'll show you another one out here in the front garden, we don't think about it being all that floriferous. It blooms like mad, so it's incredibly floriferous, but to us as people, it's not necessarily the most visually stimulating flowers. They're tiny and tend to be in muted colors where you don't see, they don't stand out. And we don't do a lot of red flowers, but this Summer Jewels red is just crazy how nice it is. And I think we were looking at it 2 weeks ago and it was like, I hope it's gonna be blooming in time. And now look at it. We're also doing this math on when we should be pruning things. If you have a timing where you want something to be peak, if we're pruning on any of these annuals or perennials, it's probably gonna take about 3 weeks for them to come back into full bloom, and we're under 3 weeks now. So at this point, we'll just deadhead any stems that kind of fade rather than giving anything a general haircut. We'll wait for general haircuts until after the open garden at this point. But this is absolutely beautiful. This area was planted as more of the Clown College design area. We went with a few little more muted colors over there toward the front. You'll see in just a minute. But the zinnias, coleus, that were planted through this area are starting to show off. And I think, again, by June 22nd, this will be full on, this will absolutely be full on color. All the conifers we're having a really mild spring. So I see the weather across the country has just been absolutely wild, and around the world, really, really intense heat all over the place. Holly, please, baby, please. She has gotten so stompy in the flowers since she turned 15. It's like I don't know. She's never been stompy in the flowers, ever. She's always been so delicate with everything. And now it's just, it definitely has changed. But I think most of these annual spaces will be full flower. But getting back to the weather, we've been super lucky here. This is one of the longest springs I can ever remember. Even this morning is in the 60s. We've had nights in the 50s right through the end of May. Not every night, but a lot. Nights in the 50s in May and June just don't make any sense here in our area. The annual borders in the front garden are really starting to show off. I had to do a little bit of watering. Yesterday coming back from Athens. We were down there and it rained all 3 days we were there a little bit. And we got back home and it was dry here. We were hoping it would have rained while we were gone. So when I say it's been mild, we have been under a little bit on water, and I had to do a little more watering than I'd like to do this early in the season. Annuals and perennials in the borders here, though, have absolutely exploded. And this is the same salvia over here, the Summer Jewels salvia, and you can see the pink one, which is, it's really nice, right? But is it as showy as that red one? No, it's not even close. But the pollinators love these salvias, this Summer Jewels series of salvia, and we get all kinds of pollinators on them. And here's kind of the lavender one, or I think, do they call this one purple or lavender? They call it lavender. It's pretty, but again, nowhere near as showy as that red. And we don't typically have a lot of red flowers out here, but that one, man, that thing is great. And they're from seed. We just do them from seed, and they're that easy. They will self-seed a little bit, so we'll get a few of those coming back, but they're not self-seedy as other things. We have other things some celosias that are particularly seedy out here that have become weeds in the garden over time. But the gomphrena, the various salvias we have out here, the purple basil's really starting to show off. Steph designed this with some eggplant, and the eggplant has the purple stems, and it's starting to show off. So this combination of purple foliage and stems with pinks and lavender and white flowers. I really like this combo, and I think by the 22nd, this will, all this stuff will be this big and be in full flower. The Empress of China dogwood really is still not peak flower, but I have a feeling, and I said this in the question and answer video that's coming up for this Sunday. I had to shoot it earlier in the week, this week. There's a plant symposium in Raleigh Friday, Saturday. It's always kind of fun because it's a lot of plant nerds from all over America coming to Raleigh for that event. But I just have a feeling, I have a photo of this tree with Buddy Lee. He was here for the plant symposium a couple years ago. We were in front of this tree this weekend and it was peak flower. This year it's a hair behind that, but I still think the flowers are gonna drop off before the open garden. I think what's gonna happen is this thing's gonna hit peak flower. It still has a little bit of green in it. That next weekend it'll hit peak flower, and then the flowers will be falling off by the time anyone's here. But I don't even know we should play a game where people estimate how many flowers are on it. Not that I'm going to come out here and count it and confirm it, but I don't have any idea how many flowers that actually is. It's in the thousands. It's in the thousands for sure. But overall, I think the front garden is a complete redesign. This was grass. This was turf last year that I'm standing in. This path is new, this path is new. The whole of the foundation planting is new and not anywhere near finished, and probably a couple things just planted in the ground so that we have something up there. We'll probably change a few things out completely, but we have a lot of room up there to plant. There's a couple spaces in here that we have room to plant as well. But overall, I think it's filling in, and I think by a couple weeks from now, it'll be hitting its stride. We showed the front fence area a week and a half ago. Eventually this is going to be painted. We're putting in the fence in the back, and I'm going to do them the same, whatever it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be yet. Every single time I show the fence off, I get 7 different opinions on staining, painting, taking down, adding to something. We will do something different than it currently is to fit in better with the house than it currently does. It had kind of a rustic look to it, and the house was a little more rustic before we did the blue and white and the new covering on the porch and all that kind of stuff. So, but we'll come. I just want to do them both at the same time, whatever that's going to be. And now the wood is appropriately dried out and be more receptive after a cleaning to painting or staining or whatever. But just coming back after 3 days from out of town, it's amazing how much everything has jumped. I mean, this was just a completely different view 2 weeks ago in the video. Now all the coneflowers are showing color. The agave's really grown a lot already this spring. It's amazing how fast those things can actually grow once they really get going. The agastache's blooming with bees on it this morning. And if Steph will move around, in that general direction, our annual border and perennial border down this middle strip, we always have maintained this as an annual strip through the middle. It's narrowed because the shrubs have gotten a little bit bigger, but the zinnias that she's right in front of, right there, starting to show some color. Vinca is really starting to show some color. The perennials that are in the middle of the border are the slowest growing thing in here because that's what we would expect. The annuals just really can race ahead of everything else because they only got one season to produce seed, and that's what they're gonna do. The perennials have time and they'll kind of take their time. But I think this strip here will be full color by the time anyone's here in a couple of weeks. And our hydrangea paniculatas are budded up. They'll also be, I think, showing color by then. The hydrangea macrophylas and serratas and oak leaves and all of those will kind of they'll be well past peak at that point, but the paniculata should be in full bloom. The drupes or fruit on the viburnum are really starting to color up. This is a Shasta viburnum, and we had hacked on this thing really hard 2 years ago, so we didn't get many flowers last year. And it came back around 2 years after the big pruning and limbing up into a small tree. It came into full flower again this spring, and then these fruit are forming. You see, even the flower parts that remain from the flowers are red, and then the drupes will turn red after that. So this thing is just super, super showy. I love the foliage on Shasta viburnum. It kind of wouldn't matter if the thing ever flowered or not, but it does flower, and then it produces this these beautiful fruit as well. And then again, the foliage is just so perfect on it. And this one, you see it grows in layering like this. And so we're, again, limbing it up into a small tree. I need to go under there and do some work on it now, get a little bit more height in it, because I want to continue to raise it up, but I won't, again, give it any kind of butchering on the top, which I did the first go around. And I needed to. It had a lot of crossing limbs. It had all kinds of issues. So, I fixed a lot of that, and I needed to do it, but it definitely took a year off from blooming because of it. Another thing that'll be peak in a couple of weeks will be the vegetable garden. I see a couple tomatoes that are ready to pick, and there's a ton of tomatoes out there in the garden, a ton of peppers. The peppers are flowering. Cucumbers are full flower, probably a cucumber or two in there already. Dahlias back there behind them will be in full flower when folks are here. This border along the front of the vegetable garden is an herb garden, but we have a couple of other things, blended into it as well. There are all 5 of the butterfly candy butterfly bushes are in here, and they're all Lil something, Lil grape, Lil coconut is the white one. I won't remember them all 5 right now, but Lil raspberry to me is just really, really striking. Very different kind of color than we've seen on other butterfly bushes. This one's a little more vigorous, the most vigorous of the 5. So it's at about 3.5 feet. So they're dwarf butterfly bushes, but this one is definitely up around 3.5 feet as it's starting to bloom this season. I can let this thing come into full flower and show off, and it will be in 2 weeks. This thing's just going to be completely covered in flowers. When it starts to slow down just a hair, we can deadhead them, and then they'll branch and you'll get more flowers. Or alternatively, you can just take your pruners and shears and just cut the thing halfway down, and it'll flush back out and come into full flower again. It's kind of your choice, how you want to handle pruning these dwarf butterfly bushes during the summertime. They're tolerant. They're extremely, extremely tolerant of it. But this little raspberry is just something else. It's just, we've got, I don't know, there's probably 8 butterfly bushes out here in the garden, but this one is just incredibly striking. All the containers in the garden are really starting to respond and grow. They were planted, 6 weeks or so ago. When you're putting small things that you rooted or divided or picked out of the ground like we do, and all kinds of variations of things, and you put something in a giant container, it takes a minute for them to get some roots on them so that they'll start putting on that top growth. But they're all starting to grow now, and I think they'll be really putting on a show here in the next couple of weeks. The went kind of heavy on this purple basil around the garden. Steph used it quite a bit, and I tell you what, that stuff is just so showy. It's just, it's not meant for the flowers. It will flower, and I saw one in the front garden, it's flowering, but that purple basil just looks so good everywhere it's been used in the garden. And if it's up against something that's has a brighter color, or against these Everillo carex, the gold, the chartreuse colored carex there, it just really pops and stands out. It makes everything else kind of show off a bit. Perennials definitely will be full flower. All of the many dahlias that are in the garden will be in full flower at that time. Shrubs look good. We've done some pruning here and there. We showed in a video last week some small pruning on a few shrubs, but they're looking good. Phlox should be blooming. Agapanthus is starting to bloom. It's kind of funny. We had these alliums, which have this same upright kind of umbel of flowers. They have finished at this point, and they'll be cut back by the 22nd, but taking their place right next to it are agapanthus that are, going to be showing off in a similar way, with that umbel on the top. One thing I'll point out, that one of the questions, many times I get questions about strange fungal activity in the garden. We have some dog vomit slime mold growing on the ground over here. And most people will call it a fungus. It's not actually a fungus. It's a protist. It's a single cell. It was considered a fungi for a long time. It's been divided out into, you know, it's a single cell organism. So it's not a fungi, but it'll grow. It grows on hardwood mulches mostly. And you'll see these slime molds or dog vomit slime molds. They're harmless in the garden. They're unattractive, but they're not causing any problem. They're actually, I think this single cell organism feeds on bacteria, and it's all the process of breaking down your mulch and making these nutrients available for everything else. It's part of the process. It spreads in the air by spores. There's no getting rid of it. You can try to rake it off or do whatever, but it's just, you're probably going to be spreading it more by messing with it. But it's no big deal, and it's welcome. You know, welcome your garden to the, you know, to the world. It's a life form you have out in your garden. It's actually ultimately going to be beneficial. Patio's well under construction. I got 2 weeks to finish it off. Most of the center is done. I've got a brick edge that's going on it that will be mortared in place. I got to pour a concrete base for that, and then mortar those bricks in place, and that will be finished by the time everyone's visiting. One thing that's really exciting in the garden is these daffodils and other bulbs are really starting to go to sleep in a hurry, and that's kind of exciting to get them out of the way, because there's other annuals planted around them, other shrubs, perennials, everything taking its place to show off. I said we cut those alliums back, but we may not, because they actually can continue to look kind of decorative in the garden, you know, for a long period of time, well into summer. But again, there's perennials and annuals everywhere that are starting to take the place of the spring flowering things and the spring foliage things, and that color's really coming on. Look who showed up right at the end of the video as we're saying goodbye. She makes sure that she's always going to be part of the video. I think she's about ready to go into the house. She wants to be outside. She wants to be outside less and less. She'll go to the door now and tell me she wants to go in. And in the past, she used to just stand at doors and just stare at them until you let her out. Now she stands at the door on the other side, going, "Hey, there's air conditioning in there. Why don't we go and do that?" So again, patio's under construction. I think by the time that folks are here in a couple of weeks, this thing's really going to hit its peak. We're going to do a little bit of mulching in spaces that we've disturbed over the last 3 months of really, we've moved a lot of plants, pruned a lot of plants, done a lot of work since we mulched last time. So there's a few spots that need it. And part of that is to be decorative for people coming, but it's also anytime you're doing soil disturbances like I'm doing around the edge of this patio, I'm uncovering weed seeds, and those weed seeds are going to go crazy if I don't get a cap on them. And that's a lot of the foot traffic and other traffic that we have in these beds needs to be capped off. Doesn't need to be capped off with much, but just a little bit of mulch. That little cap that I put on it will prevent a lot of those weed seeds from germinating. They may find a way in the future, but at least it won't be all at once. Like it would be otherwise. So there you go. That's how the garden is looking here, leading up to an open house that we're having on June 22nd, or open garden, I should say open garden. House will not be open. Open garden on the 22nd, and also on Friday the 21st. And the details of this are in the Sunday question and answer videos if you tune into those every week. Thanks for watching.